talk a little bit about faith and why it is that we bring a faith frame to these issues of health inequities, to these issues of root causes of health inequities. Before I do that, I want to just say a quick word about the Center for Faith and Community Health Transformation. The center was sort of came about, I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but the center sort of arose out of a convergence of people who were working at health inequity issues from a faith perspective, and we needed some kind of an entity to pull those efforts together. And so that kind of came into being the Center for Faith and Community Health Transformation, which right now is sponsored by Advocate Healthcare, Congregational Health Partnerships program of Advocate Healthcare, the UIC Neighborhoods Initiative, but we also were kind of born out of the Chicago Department of Public Health and their I-planning process, which for those of you who may not be aware of that, it's a process each health department has to go through every 5 years to plan strategically about community engagement. And so we have a very strong relationship with the Chicago Department of Public Health, Cook County Department of Public Health as well, and other health departments. It's a collaborative endeavor. If you're interested in faith and public health, you're interested in faith and changing and the role that faith has in impacting health disparities, you're part of the center. And we want you to own it as well and to help to move the work forward. Okay, what I'm going to do is just give you some ideas to think about, and then to have some conversation in your groups again, because part of what you're doing here today is you're starting to form a team. You're starting to form a small community that's going to work together to really impact a health issue that you've identified. Some of you have come as formed teams already, and so you may be farther along. Some of you are just starting to learn to know each other. But the idea is that as you form a community together, as you learn together, you will be able to do this work at a deeper level more effectively. So you'll share a little bit in your small groups, and we're going to be doing a lot of that, again, to try to foster the relationships that you have with each other. The ideas that I want to give you are a couple of ideas that we think, when I say we, I mean the center and the folks that have sort of birthed the center, think are really critical for people of faith as the part of the way that we lead in impacting health inequities. A lot of times we think about health inequities, health disparities as public health issues, and we need public health leaders to change those things, and truly we do. But we also need something more, because public health can't do it on its own. Healthcare providers can't do it on their own. Social service agencies can't do it on their own. Each discipline, each sector brings something important. So what does faith bring? What is it that we know as people of faith that is going to give us, that other disciplines, that other sectors need to get to these root causes and to get to these deeper changes, transformational changes that we need? So two of the things that we talk about, and these are two. I'm sure there are lots of others that we could come up with. But two things that we talk about is, number one, moral imagination. Moral imagination. This is something that as people of faith, we have the authority to speak to. Because hopefully from our religious traditions, from our holy scriptures, there are elements of that call us to a new way of seeing. In the Christian tradition, we might call it the realm of God, or God's kingdom on earth. Every religious tradition has a different way of speaking about that. This idea that things as they are, that we are not bound by things as they are, that there is also things as they can be, and that we live in the hope and in the trust that is possible in our time. So that's one thing, moral imagination. The second thing is something that one of our great heroes locally here in Faith and Health, Reverend Jim Ben, talked about. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, way too early, and we miss him greatly. But he was a lifelong community organizer out of the Saul Alinsky model. And so he knew all about organizing, community organizing, and some of the key principles of community organizing. One of which is that in order to organize, you need people power. You need to have people that are engaged and working. The second thing is you have to have money power. You have to go to the economics of the issue. And Jim said those things are really important, really powerful. But what we really need as well is spirit power. Because another principle of organizing, and I know I'm really simplifying community organizing down very much, so excuse me, community organizers, I know I'm simplifying. Is that another principle is that you choose winnable battles. Now, spirit power says we're not bound by what is perceived to be winnable. Any major social change movement looks unwinnable. Take any example, civil rights movement in this country. There was nothing about that was winnable. But people of faith said, we have the power, we have the moral imagination to see a new reality. And we have the power of God. Who said it? Somebody said, there's nothing too hard for God. Did you say that?
Yes.
Yes. That's spirit power right there. That spirit power that says, we're not bound by, society and what society thinks can happen. We have the testimony. We have the witness. We have the truth that comes from our religious tradition that helps us know that we can overcome things that seemingly cannot be overcome. And we see it happen in our lives every day as we practice out our faith. So those two ideas, moral imagination, the vision for a new reality, a vision that we can dare as people of faith to say, we can see a world without health inequities. We can see a world where there is no racism. We can see a world where there is no more poverty. And we have the spirit power to drive us toward that new reality. So what I'd like you to do, well, let me stop there for just a second, because those are some big ideas. Any quick comments about that? And I'm saying quick because we want to keep moving here. But these are things that we'll circle back around over the next. So we don't have to we don't have to say it all right now. We're going to circle back around this as we go through the next 5 months together. Any just quick thoughts, like a word or a phrase or something that comes as you hear these two ideas?
Momentum.
Momentum?
Pray for peace, work for justice.
Okay, yes. Yeah, so pray, see the peace, pray for it, spirit power, you can work for it. Yeah.
No limits.
No limits. No limits.
Power.
Power. Power. What else? Anything else?
All things are possible.
All things are possible. All things are possible. Eve.
Social marketing. I mean, one thing I realized in this project I was in working with this congregation on the southeast side, so their public health people had been, public health talked a lot about social marketing, and I realized a lot of pastors mastered that.
Yeah?
Because, the ability to move people, the ability to use humor to convey a message. Public health people should be learning from the pastors how to do social.
Yeah. Well, and it's a different kind of, the kind of social marketing pastors are doing is that they're putting it in the language of faith and in the context of faith, which is really important. The other thing I wanted to say about these two things and about faith is that, as we talk about health inequities, these are wicked problems. These are very complex, very difficult problems that get us into all kinds of difficult conversations. There is no way in our culture to have a conversation about race and racism without it being a difficult conversation. There's no way in our culture to have a conversation about poverty and not have it be a difficult conversation, because now you're talking about people's money. And that gets into challenges. These conversations are very hard. And I think it was this table over here, you guys were actually talking about that. You were talking about what happens when you start to push up, when you start to lay out moral imagination and bring your spirit power, there's pushback. And so again, that's where the practice of faith and really rooting ourselves in the spiritual practices of our tradition, or if we don't have a spiritual practice, if we're not from a particular religious perspective, in the sort of the deepest roots of your values and of your life perspective, to really stay in that place is critical for this work that we're doing. So as you think about your teams and as you work as teams, try to kind of keep these ideas in mind of what's, for this issue that we're dealing with in our team, what is our moral imagination as public health people, as faith people on this issue? What is the spirit power that drives us around this issue? And so what I want you to do now is just take a couple of minutes and think for yourself, what is it in my tradition that, how do we talk about this in my tradition? In the Muslim tradition, how do you this language of moral imagination or spirit power, how do you talk about that in the Muslim tradition? In the Hindu tradition, how do you think about these things of, sort of an ideal reality and spiritual energy that can create change? In the Christian tradition, how do we think about that? How do we talk about that? What are the words that we use? What are the sources that you go to in your tradition? What are the sources in your tradition that you go to find teaching about these things? And how do we express it corporately in our tradition? Is it expressed? How do we work at these things corporately, collectively in our tradition? Do we? What does that look like? How does that get carried out in the life of our religious community? So take a minute, think about that for yourselves. The questions are, what's the language that we use? What are the words that we use for these things? What are the sources that we go to? And how do we express it corporately, collectively? These ideas of moral imagination and spirit power. And then just, again, briefly, start to share with each other. You don't have to cover everything in what you share with each other. Just pick one thing to share with your table mates, with your teammates. From your religious perspective, how do these things have life in your experience?
And growing with
Some thinking and some considering and some conversation with each other.
with it and embracing your challenges and passions, if you will. Not
These are
selfish.
rich opportunities to kind of delve into our traditions a little bit more and even
bringing
explore a
to the
little bit more in
table
our
what
own
you
traditions
want.
that we may feel very familiar with, but to have an opportunity to hear from others about how they think about these things can also help us learn more from our own tradition as well. So this is, just a very brief taste of, partly why we're doing this Faith and Public Health Institute, that we want to bring not faith communities just as captive audiences for public health to bring their programs, but to look at how people of faith in community can also be leaders and need to be leaders in addressing health inequities, and that we need to take very seriously the parts of our religious traditions that call us to be engaged in the transformation of our communities and the wholeness and the healing of our communities, which is essentially, what our faith traditions, hopefully call us to.